the weekly show dedicated to helping frontliners who are our law enforcement, firefighters, first responders, and medical professionals deal with day-to-day anxieties and stresses they encounter in their jobs. I'm your host, John. We have an awesome show for you today. Today's show is an attitude of gratitude, the daily choice between life and death. We've got a great panel today. As always, we've got Nurse Jeannie. She's got 30 years of RN experience. We've got retired Officer Dean, 25 years. We have our PhD and expert on mental health and substance abuse, Melinda. And we're joined today by retired Fire Chief Joe, 20 years on the job. He also has an experience in mental health. So basically what our goal is with this show is to try to provide solutions and offer some help to situations that people get into at work when they need help. How do they turn to people? Who do they ask? How do they go about that? And through our own journeys, experiences, and some of the coping skills we've learned, we will kind of share that in a roundtable, non-scripted, fellowship-style conversation. And hopefully we can help some of those that need help on their way. So let's dig in. Let's buzz. Let's start with Joe. Joe, so what we talked about with the attitude of gratitude is choosing a profession, going into a profession that takes a lot of selfless dedication and work. And we talked about this before. You had mentioned that you go in with these expectations and I'm going to help somebody, that's why I want this job. And then when you get into it and you start working the job, you start getting nicked. And so what does that look like years down the road? And if we back up, what made you want to start? And then if you can continue on from there, share some experiences and some things that maybe helped you through those situations.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I thank you for the invitation to join your panel. As was said, I spent 20 years working as a firefighter. Got into that field, again, because we wanted to help. If you ask anybody in the room, we had this altruistic value of wanting to help people in some capacity. Then we get into the job and then the realities set in. And we realize it's not all roses and buttercups, that there are grim realities associated with the job. The worst part of it probably is people die on your watch. People suffer extreme injuries, and there's a lot of trauma that you see and experience over the course of your career. And that takes its toll on the responder, on the individual. Even in mental health, if you have a client that suicides, that's devastating, to you as a provider. And we always go back to, what did I do wrong? We always reflect back on our own skills and competencies, and we start to question, what did I do wrong? Or could I have done something different or something better to change the outcome? And that's tough, and it takes its toll. And particularly, the cultures of our organizations tend to make it they make it hard for us in the sense that when we're stressed by an outcome, we're often told, suck it up.
Right.
Pull your bootstraps up, get back on the horse. There's no time for reflection. It's just get back to the job.
Right.
Many times that leads to, okay, I'm going to take things into my own hands. I'm going to dull the pain that I'm feeling, the psychic pain that, the reason I feel bad right now, I'm going to dull that maybe with some alcohol or other chemical medications. We find ourselves slipping into our own personal abyss if we're not careful. So we have to find ways to support each other. And many times that comes from within our own culture. It's hard for a firefighter to talk to a cop because we haven't walked the same path. It's hard for a nurse to talk to a firefighter because our paths, they cross only in the emergency room. You know, the time that our interactions are very, very limited. So we go back to our own culture, we go back to our own brethren, and we say, okay, you know, I'm feeling particularly stressed about this. Now, typically that response is, well, let's go out and have a beer and we'll talk about it. You know, and of course that leads to another and another, you know. So we've got to find a way within our own organizations, within our own cultures of emergency responders, to find that it's okay to ask for help.
Right, it's okay to not be okay. I
So we
think
touched
that's
on this.
the message.
We touched on this last week now with this pandemic, right? And you know, anybody can jump in, feel free, but I think it was Ashley talked about this last week, not having the social, being able to have the social interaction right now because of the lockdowns and the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders, and still continuing to go out and the frontliners are doing their job. You know, there isn't that opportunity to have that one-on-one with somebody else to relieve that stress and anxiety. So, you know, what is something you have done to try to take care of those problems?
Well, yes, you're right. It is really hard because that is something that we can do in our profession, is we can talk to another human being, especially somebody that knows what we're going through. And that's not happening right now. So I turn to if I can find somebody online to talk to that can relate, I'll do that. I pick up the phone and call somebody, a friend, a family member. I'm very close with my sister. I'll call her and say, God, today sucked. I think one of the best medicines is, even if it doesn't feel comfortable talking about this, maybe it was a really bad situation, maybe I had a death, there's something therapeutic about getting it off your chest and talking about it to another human being. So, yeah, that's what I've been doing a lot of, is just picking up the phone and calling people I'm close to so that I can talk to somebody about it. There's not a lot of time at work on the job. It's like we fix people and then we do what we gotta do and then we move on. And then you punch out and then you go home. And then you're left with it.
That's a very interesting thought too, because I think within each of the different organizational structures, there is time. For example, in the fire service, we have a tragic event, we'll go back to the firehouse, we've got to put the rigs back in order, we'll sit down on the tailboard, or we'll sit in the galley and we'll sit down and talk about, because we share time together. Police officer, on the other hand, gets back in the squad and answers the next call.
Right.
You know, hospital staff, they've got another patient waiting in the queue. You know, so you know, it's one of those challenges within our own career choices. How do we take care of ourselves and have that opportunity to have that conversation at some point in time?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And how did you used to decompress, Steve?
Well, it's a fine line. Joseph, you know, you don't have a lot of the frontline people, the officers out taking calls. They just go from call to call to call, and I think that's a big part of law enforcement that's lacking. There's not that time to reflect or to think about, and you know, that's with this epidemic that's going on now. I think in all our professions, I think we in society as a whole takes it for granted that we're all three of our professions are going to be there. And if you were to ask a bunch of cops, I mean, you have to be careful when they're going to work, but we have to go to work, and you still have to answer the calls. You still have to go to the places. So a lot of cops will probably tell you that it is concerning for them. Take necessary steps to protect themselves, but I think that's what's lacking, and you know, that everything is expected for us to be okay, and we just head out there, you know. So Yeah, no, and I think what we touched on last week too, I think another thing that's lacking in our profession is the idea of officers come forward and say that they have issues with mental health or, depression, anxiety, alcohol. I think the stigma is there that is stopping people from getting help, and I think that the departments as a whole has taken some steps to make it better. But I think, like you said earlier, the first thing is somebody says you got an issue, they want to put you on the desk. And is that really helping the problem, or getting you the right help? It should be looked at as not a punishment. It should be looked at as trying to better yourself
Exactly.
so you're better to do your job.
Point well taken.
Right. I mean, as we know, 1 in 4 people are affected by some type of mental health issue, and 1 in 8 are affected by some type of a substance abuse issue. So, substance abuse or mental health issues do not discriminate. I mean, that's law enforcement, that's firefighters, that's health professionals. As a matter of fact, health professionals are the #1 profession that struggle with substance abuse. So, yeah, it's very much an issue. And we do need to get them the help that they need. So,
I think
Yeah.
we have to work harder with stigma. Unfortunately, I think we've made some headway, but we have a long way to go. There is just stigma attached to specific people that are having some mental health issues. And it's really troubling for me. I work real hard at my job to not discriminate. When we put our uniform on, it doesn't say judge. It says registered nurse or physician or whatever your title is. And I think that's just an area I would like to see change some more.
absolutely, great. Yes. And I'm just curious, between the 3 of you, I mean, because we are in the middle of a pandemic right now, I mean, did your jobs ever prepare you for anything of this magnitude?
I guess I would say, in theory, yes, you talk about worst case scenarios. You develop models for response to disasters. But a lot of those are paper exercises, tabletop exercises. This is the real world. This is a once in a century kind of experience.
Right.
I saw something the other day that tracked every 20 decade, the decade of the 20s in each century has had a pandemic since the 1700s. So we're in our cycle. But the point is, we as the United States, as the world right now, nobody has ever experienced anything like this. And so you can try to prepare, but nothing reaches the scale that this is at this point in time.
Yeah, and don't you think that, like, I was having a conversation with a few friends who are in the construction business that are still currently, working, doing some stuff at people's houses, and the guy had made a comment about going into somebody's house, and it was a fairly trashy, dirty house, and putting stuff on. And I think in our professions, I think even looking at what's going on right now, I mean, if you back it up and really kind of narrow it down to, we like the basics. We should be washing our hands. We shouldn't be sneezing on somebody. We shouldn't, we should be. And I think I look back in my career, how many times, we've put hands on somebody that fluids without rubber gloves, or going into places and not wearing a mask. And I think out of this might change some of that. And you can think of all of our professions. How many times You know, I was thinking about the other day when, the last time I was at the doctor's office, the doctor came in and examined me and, you know, checked my knee and my back. No rubber gloves on, but now is that gonna be changed, you know? I mean, but them are things that we should already be doing with the kind of
Practicing.
culture we have with
Right.
the different stuff we can catch. Firemen, nurses, you know, how many times as a nurse have you touched somebody that you didn't have gloves on or a or, you know, a face mask? And so, I mean, I think I'm more of the, with this is, I personally think it's a little blown out of proportion, but I do take it serious, obviously. But I mean, I think there is a lot of truth to that. We should be doing a lot of this stuff already, that, taking the precautions that we do. And I think all three of our professions probably could do a better job. Like you said, you prepare for 9/11, we prepared for chemical disaster, you know, that are bomb threats or bombs and stuff like that. But I think what's happening now, something like a virus or a bacteria, them things can be also simplified by us doing things like, I mean, you know, I mean, it would look funny, but you know, it could, we would drive around in our squad cars and have the guys all have rubber gloves on and masks.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what it's, maybe that's something that has to happen based on,
Yeah,
you know,
there can definitely be some good things that come from all of this, right? I mean, people's hygiene can improve.
yeah.
Well, I think it'll be interesting as a societal issue when and if they give the all clear, what are people gonna be like going outside to the first gathering or back to a restaurant or a concert or, you know, I've already heard some restaurants they're gonna keep the social distancing maybe inside for a while. I mean, it's up to remove tables or, you know, going to the state fair or going to a concert is people like, it's gonna be a dramatic change, I would think, going forward after this.
We're gonna pick up some new habits. You know,
Absolutely.
how many times have we washed our hands today?
Right.
Used sanitizers?
Yeah.
We're all
used
gonna have
wipes and-
OCD.
Right, exactly. But I think it creates a situational awareness. We're much more sensitive right now to where we are in space in relationship to other people. You know, we go to the grocery store to pick up our essentials, and we give people wide berth now, as
Mhm.
opposed to you know, pushing our cart and you know kind of controlling. We maintain distance,
Yeah.
and we've changed a lot of our behaviors, and so some of those will be for the positive.
Absolutely.
That will keep us healthier in the long term.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that you know, we talk about PPE, the physical PPE. I think there's that psychological PPE that we have to put on as well. We're changing as a society, as a culture because of this. It's causing us to look at our relationships. It's causing us to look at how, you know, what are our values. You know, what things are important to us in life.
Absolutely.
You know, and so I think as first responders, as you know, in our professions, we have to not only use the physical PPE, but we have to create our own sense of resilience. That this is a crisis, but we're going to get through this.
We are.
We need to accept that challenge and not look at it as a threat, but as an opportunity. It goes back to that notion of, you know, the Chinese symbol for crisis is you know, that same thing about opportunity, and I think we can benefit from this.
Yes, I do too. I really do. I see families playing outside when I drive down the street, you know. Yeah, unfortunately, some of those parents maybe don't have jobs right now, you know, which is a downfall. But on the other hand, when do they get that quality time with their kids, you know? So there are definitely some downfalls, but there are definitely some positives as well. So it's all how we perceive this moment in time.
And I think we're learning, I think all of us, because we've never been faced with this before, we're learning as we go.
Mhm.
When this all first started, we didn't wear masks at work, and then the following week when I went to work, we all were to wear masks. So I think, even people in administration are like, whoa, what do we do here? And then the CDC puts out different recommendations sometimes as time goes on. So there's a big learning curve here too for all of us to learn and grow as we go.
Yeah, and bigger picture even, the world as a whole is coming together, right? You look at these countries and they all have to work together. We have the best doctors in the world that are having to come up with a cure or some kind of remedy to, some type of medicine or remedy to help fight the virus. So that's kind of a really interesting thing too. We're not all fighting right now, so.
Well, until you get to social media.
Yeah. Speaking of social media, we do have a Facebook. Is it up there on the page? Recoverybuzz or Facebook. Like us on.
Not yet.
Okay.
It
We have it
will
up there. Come on.
Any comments or anything yet?
No comments yet.
Not
Okay.
yet? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get there.
I mean, I think the biggest thing too for that, not only in our professions, and I think that need to be addressed, with the anxiety of the jobs we do, the stressors, and the daily grind, like you said earlier, with something like this, I think it also plays a huge mental part in is that being out of it a little bit now, I can reflect back, but looking on the people that are on the front lines now, going, you talk to half a dozen people, neighbors, friends, and like, oh, thank God I can work from home, or, I don't have to, go in the office, I can do it on the computer. Well, our professions don't have that luxury, so
Right.
the mental part of that grind of facing that, and I think a lot of our professions over, not just this situation, but we've all just been, this is my job, I gotta do it, and I gotta be away from my family, and I gotta go take care of other people's families, or whatever the case is, and I think that plays a huge mental stress. I remember back on Y2K, I remember when my mother was in the hospital, we were all forced to work, young baby at home, thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, what happens if, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and here I'm at work, protecting the streets and the citizens that I'm working.
Do your job.
And and that's a huge mental strain.
Absolutely.
And, my mom's in the hospital, I'm going, well, how am I gonna help my mom? She's down, So it's a huge strain that I think is overlooked in our professions as far as in getting the proper help and giving that, and I haven't heard enough of what departments or agencies are doing to besides, trying to, for crying out loud, the hospitals, it's ridiculous. People are hoarding the masks and the stuff and hand sanitizer and,
Toilet paper.
there's stuff made, just so they're aware. How ridiculous is that, and, having that grind of going there and having not even, it's like you said, normal person, oh my gosh, there's no toilet paper or cleaning supplies. Okay, well, eventually you can find some. But when you're at your job, doing your job, and you don't have the proper stuff to maintain what you're doing, you start to question, what the hell am I doing here? And
But yet, you show up.
you show up.
That was the
right?
thing I was going to hit on earlier, was that, for the rest of us that aren't in these professions, we can turn off our social media. You guys are all privy to the same headlines and newscasts and everything else that's going on, so you read it, rest of us could say, I've had enough of that for the day, nothing's new, you know, it's gonna be, but you guys have to get up in the morning and look at those same statistics and say, I'm going to punch the clock, I'm here to take care of the problem. And
Right.
with that presents anxiety and some stressors and things like that, which have to be challenging, so.
Right, again, it's the daily choice between really life or death, right?
Yeah.
Because you know that there always is that potential, right?
Yeah, you don't get to have the computer showing 40 calls in the pending. You don't usually get to pick what calls you get
Yeah.
to go to.
Right,
They just keep coming, and you keep responding.
And then, you know, with the masks and the PPE, right, it's like, there's places that know they're gonna be short the next day, yet they've gotta get up and go in and figure out how to do their job with the limited resources they have at that specific moment, so,
right.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it is a daily choice, it really is.
You know, in the
Even-
past for law enforcement, and I know, and I kind of touched on this last week, but you know, when you're put in that position of in St. Paul, and you know, different from the suburbs, but St. Paul, Minneapolis, you know, and some other bigger cities have full-time paramedics, full-time fire engines that show up. A lot of times, we'd get to calls, and you know, firemen will be already there based on what kind of call it is. But when you're going into a situation in law enforcement, you don't even have the luxury to, you know, you're going somewhere. So you not only now with the culture it is now you have to go, okay, guy's bleeding, or she's bleeding. Okay, well, I should glove up, but then also your instincts kick in of your officer safety is like, okay, somebody gonna hurt me from here, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so it's kind of a double,
Yeah, you've got that added layer.
yeah, and I think that's why in the past it's been, you just have not taken that, you don't have the time to stop and go, oh, let me get my rubber gloves on.
Yeah.
No offense to firemen, you know, you guys are going to a fire engine, you get, you know, you're putting on your stuff, you know you're going to a fire, you know what I mean? You know, nurses, you can prepare for that. You know, even even in the back over the years, it used to be, when I first started, they'd say, a lot of the old timers, they would never wear their seatbelts.
Yeah,
And they say, you're gonna get in trouble, you get in an accident, you don't wear your seatbelt. Well, if you're in the grind and you got a seatbelt on and your gun's tucked underneath your seatbelt, and you feel real vulnerable, you know? And so it's kinda almost like going in without any rubber gloves or a mask, you know?
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that last week, it's, you know, with all the extra steps that a nurse or a first responder deciding what layer they need to put on, and sometimes you're dealing with seconds to make a difference with a patient or a situation with law enforcement or something, and you're taking an extra 3 or 4 minutes to put on gloves and a mask and a shield and everything else. It adds up.
Yeah.
I think one of the strategies that's helpful in circumstances like that, I would kind of call it crisis rehearsal, in the sense that it's related to situational awareness. You know the call, you know what you're going to, so you start playing some tapes in your head based on previous experience, training. All of those kinds of things give you an opportunity to prepare yourself mentally for, you know, the potentials. And then you rely on that situational awareness to help you, guide you through the first steps of the response, whatever it may be. So preparing yourself mentally by having this conversation on the way, again, creates a sense of personal confidence. I can handle the situation. I've got the training, I've got the skills, I've got the knowledge. Now let's see it unfold. So just a strategy for helping you
Absolutely.
cope with those stressors of the particular incident.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Actually, that sounds very familiar. It sounds similar to a skill that I know I've shared with you guys called Coping Ahead.
Mhm.
I remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very similar. Just putting yourself in that situation and knowing ahead of time what you're getting yourselves into and putting a plan together based on that situation so that when you get there, you're already mentally prepared to deal with that situation.
Do you, Joe, have, like, we talked last week about coping skills or things to help decompress? Is there something you've used in the past to kind of bring yourself back to a normal state of mind after a stressful day or a situation that you kind of felt like you were underwater on?
I think there's many techniques, many strategies that one can use. I think one that's so simple and so easily done is some mindfulness activity. Meditation, breathing. Controlling your breathing will do amazing things to reduce stress levels, stress hormones. It works. It can be done in private. You can do it in your squad car. You can do it in the break room for 2 minutes. All you need to do is recenter, refocus, get back, to that baseline of kind of homeostasis where, okay, all systems are operating. Yeah, I'm stressed, but I can handle this. We're not going to remove stress. We can't possibly remove stress from our lives, particularly in this day and age. But what we can do is take it down a notch from the highest levels of stress to a moderate or manageable level of stress through using some strategies. Mindfulness being one. There's a concept that if you can label it, if you can identify the emotion, you can control it. If you can say, I'm really pissed right now, okay, you can understand what anger does, and so then you can use some strategies to manage that anger and deflect that anger from the current situation so you don't take it out on a patient or a client or a victim of a tragedy, you see.
Yeah.
Other things like, schedule a time when you can journal or write down all of the stuff that's bugging you right now, that, your worry list. These are all the things that I'm worried about. Because you're labeling it, you can write it down, and then you can set it aside. It's still there, it's been identified, but now you can get back to things that are going to that allow you to operate at optimum.
Just to get that release.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategies out there. A lot
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
That's
those are
helpful.
really good.
That's very helpful. At my hospital, we have an employee resilience room,
There you go.
and I love it down there. I go down there on my break, and I will do the breathing and do meditation, and I find it very effective. I probably started about 2 years ago, and what a difference it makes. Because you have all these feelings and emotions, and you don't know what to do with them. And, you can go any way. You can get angrier, you can get more anxious, and then it's just a snowball effect, and then you get this stinking thinking, and before you know it, your mind's all over the place. And whereas mindfulness, if you just pay attention to your breathing, you're paying attention to something other than all those thoughts in your head, and then you can just, create a vision, a beautiful, serene vision. Mine is a hot air balloon whereby you have all the weights on, and you walk through a beautiful sunny field, and you get in the balloon, and each time you lift a weight off, you're lifting off
There you go.
the stress.
Beautiful
the
metaphor.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And as you go up, it's getting less and less.
Lighter.
So that's my visual. It's my go-to visual that I use. It's very effective for me.
I think anything that you can do that can help you refocus. Take for example, if this were a cup of coffee, just taking the coffee and smelling the coffee, and then experiencing the warmth as you drink. You know what I'm saying? You're centering
Engage the
on
senses.
sensory
Yep,
kinds of
the
experiences
senses, absolutely.
that help refocus you. The concept is to get you out of that period of stress and find a way to abate that stress to a more manageable level.
Yeah, anytime you engage all of your senses, it brings you to the present moment. Those are all grounding techniques.
Do we call it distress tolerance?
It could be a form of
Try
that,
something out.
sure.
Yeah, we got a comment from Kathy. She was wondering what you all might have to share that you've done the last few weeks to support your coworkers. Helpful hints.
Oh, okay. Any feedback for Kathy?
Yeah, that's one thing in the nursing department. We have each other's backs. We really do. You know, maybe somebody is not having a good day and there's a particular patient that's maybe a little bit more difficult and he or she is assigned to that patient. I'll say, you know what? I'll take Mr. X.
Oh, that's sweet.
Switching up.
We switch out. And that's really helpful because we are not all in the same state at the same time. That just
Right.
doesn't happen.
So
We're human
true.
beings,
Mhm.
for one thing. So you never know what somebody's going through.
I think if we go back to what Maslow said, if we meet basic needs first, you know, just getting somebody some food,
Right?
getting somebody something to drink, you know, a glass of water or something, you know, doing these small little acts that meet basic needs. That's the first thing that I would look for, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Yes. so
A lot
true.
of restaurants, for example, they're closed, but they're doing takeout kinds of things.
Mhm.
They're providing food to first responders. I know I signed up for a GoFundMe thing through a local sandwich shop that was supplying submarine sandwiches to hospital workers.
That's awesome.
You know, those are the kinds of things. And so somebody even outside,
Do you know what restaurant that was? I'd like to.
Firehouse
recognize-
Subs.
Firehouse
Oh,
Subs.
Firehouse
Subs
Subs.
Yeah,
is
it's not
doing
bad.
that.
Awesome.
You know, they generate funds that go to
Mhm.
supporting worthy causes. So,
Sure.
but the point is the fact that anybody can do that, not just
Yes.
public safety or you know, figures, but mom and dad or you know Joe Blow out there on the street
Right.
can do the very same thing by
Yes.
you know creating some kind of a donation or contribution to a cause like that.
Yeah. I know, Dean, you said that you were making soup. People.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
dropping
awesome.
some soup off from different people and,
Mhm.
yeah, I think
I
that
noticed you didn't make it to my house.
you have to have some kind of thing in return, so when you make a batch, you should let me know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes listening too is an important skill to have.
Oh, for sure.
Validating, didn't we talk about validating before?
Yes, yes.
One of the-
Paid attention.
One of the other things, like this technology that we're using right now to have a conversation with other people.
Yes.
Reaching out to family.
Sure.
Because they're isolated. They're
Mhm.
apart. Everybody's maintaining their social distance, staying at home. Use the technology, Zoom or whatever platform you use. On Friday, I had a conversation with some retired friends of mine, and then I also had a conversation with my siblings, and we were able to connect using the technology. Lots of laughs, lots of stress release. You know, we were having cocktails and things like that just to, you know, celebrate our Friday afternoon happy hour. But the point is we were able to connect, even though it was vicarious or, you know, through a technology, at least we still had that face-to-face communication and contact. It didn't have the touch part to it, but it had the heart touch.
Sure.
Yeah. And I find just even with doing things like that, having fun and being creative. I do a support group Thursday night, and I did a scavenger hunt with them for 3 hours, which was a lot of fun. So just finding creative ways to connect with people as well. I think that's a lot of fun.
There's a thing now where you put hearts on your front window.
Yeah, we've done it. Those
You know.
flowers, it's
Yeah,
something
you know,
different each week or something, yeah.
There are just ways to reach out to other people to let them know we're thinking about you.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
We talked about it last week. New York did 2 2-minute clapping session across
Yeah.
throughout the city. Italy's been
Yeah.
doing it 8 o'clock at
Italy,
night or Rome. Yeah.
Music,
Yeah.
that's another thing, is the joy of music. And so
Right.
we're seeing
Oh,
these,
yes.
all of these
Yeah.
stars are putting out, broadcasts on the internet, just to share because their concerts are all gone, they're still reaching out to their
That's great.
their fans.
How great would it be for this kind of social behavior to continue on after this pandemic and everybody to keep doing these same things, you know?
Yeah, again.
Good luck.
Some good
Well, hopefully,
Good things are
hopefully it's our new
happening.
normal.
Yeah, that's
Right,
right. It would be
again.
awesome. It would be
Yes,
great.
that's
You know,
what we're hoping.
I think the fear is I think, you know, if you look back at 9/11 and the certain major events that have happened, I think it would be nice for that to change. And I think, unfortunately, the creatures of habit keep coming back where we generally just kind of go right back into that kind of same mode, you know, and that, I think that's the fear for a lot of people. And but you know, it's maybe continuing to keep having discussions about it to make the change for the better. I think we'll all be better off. You know, I mean, I always think back to the story about 9/11 and you know how they talked about bracing the airplanes, and you know they had the metal bars and all these screenings and all this stuff, and you couldn't get on a plane. And I remember like it was like 8 or 9 months after 9/11, and we went on a trip, and I was in first class, and you know first time flying, the kids were in the back of the plane and everything. You know, everybody's kind of freaking out, and they bring a meal to you in first class, and here they hand me a you know, regular knife and a fork, and I'm thinking, it's only been like 8 months, you know, and I'm thinking, here I got the fork and the knife in my hand, and I'm like, what happened to the plastic, you know, I mean, you know what I mean? And I mean, but it was in that short of a distance, how we went right back to
Yeah.
that comfort zone, you know, of feeling that,
Some lessons are short-lived. you know.
right.
So I think if we segue here now, Melinda had thought about we'd all go through and maybe with all the doom and gloom and the angry politics and yelling and screaming and finger pointing going on with us, that maybe we could share something positive, something end on a happy note here. If anybody's got, you know, we don't need to necessarily go in order, but if anybody's got a little story or a blurb or something they read or saw or did.
Yeah, just
for-
kind of random, but
Just-
I want to give a shout out actually to my daughter in Okinawa. She got some spouses together on the base in Okinawa. They're making masks for people here in the States. They're making quite a few actually, because she knows that there is a shortage. So I just want to say thank you to Amanda. Yeah, she's gonna send them back to give to you guys.
Oh.
So I know, it's very cool.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for all the support from everybody. It's just been overwhelming. My daughter's girlfriend made hundreds of masks, and I got some of those.
Wow.
And my niece
That's cool.
came over today and dropped off masks and some treats and K-Pods for me. And I feel very blessed that people are reaching out and recognizing that it is a tough job. And I'm grateful to have my job. A lot of people don't have their jobs.
Right.
So I'm grateful that I have my job, as hard as it is.
On that note, I'm grateful that I'm retired.
Me too.
But seriously, you know, I think the one thing that I'm grateful for is that here in Minnesota, we're seeing some really tremendous leadership. I think we're seeing a very measured and appropriate response. I think our numbers are actually showing that if you look at some of the data. Minnesota Yeah, there's an advantage to being in flyover land. You know, the arrival of the bug was probably much deferred here compared to the coast. But, you know, the point is our measured response and our public safety folks have done a lot of preparation. They've done a lot of training. They've thought about this. We've got some really smart people like Dr. Osterholm at the university, the epidemiologist. You know, we're very fortunate to live in this community.
Yes.
And for that, I am extremely grateful.
Me too, definitely. Yeah. And I'm thankful for all of you guys too. I appreciate all the work that you guys have done in the past and continue to do, even though you are retired. Just all of your words of wisdom and everything that you offer to everybody currently, it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
And I think it's cool that people know that maybe didn't realize before that they've got helping bones in their body. They can make somebody smile. And unfortunately, it took a big pandemic to maybe bring that out. But it's showing that as a community, we can rise up together and try to hit things head on and you know, basically try to problem solve and make everything work better. So I think that's great, and it's a community thing, and it makes everybody stronger, and it makes you feel good. You see people helping somebody, and you know, hopefully this all comes to an end. Like I said, these habits will continue on, and we can try to get a little bit more peaceful structure in our lives. So,
Yeah, definitely.
so 502. So I guess we'd like to thank Joe for stopping in and with his excellent perspective and knowledge on these topics. And again, for Jeannie, Dean, and Melinda, I'm John. Thank you for tuning into the Recovery Buzz, and we'll see you next Sunday.
All right, thank you.
Bye.